want to talk about the Passion tonight, and I'm so glad to be able to do that, not talk about whether or not it is anti-Semitic or not. The first 8 months after I saw the film back in June of last year, and a rough cut version, and for the next 8 months, all I did, God bless you, was go around saying it isn't anti-Semitic, it isn't anti-Semitic, it isn't anti-Semitic, on the radio, on television, and newspapers. And so when it finally came out and the rest of you got to see it, then finally I was like, can we talk about something else now? And I actually said this to a friend of mine in DC, and she said, well, why don't you just come and talk about the art of the movie? And we had 190 people show up at that, and we basically had just done some word of mouth. So again, you see, the movie is having such an impact for people in that they want to talk about why it worked on them, or why it didn't. But for the most part, I'm thinking why it worked on them, what and how it made them feel, and how it had the power to do that. So it's just a great privilege to have a film like this to be able to discuss and share with you now. It's interesting, the Pope says that art, great art, is a source of theology, especially great sacred art. He says this in a letter to the artist. It's a source of theology. Think about that. It's not that an artist reads theology and then makes art. It's that an artist prays, and then God goes bloomp, and they get an insight, and then they turn around and go, and then that thing becomes a source of theology, where then people write books about it. So you've already kind of seen this with The Passion, right? I know of 4 books that have been written or are being written about the film. Put yourself ahead 50 years, and there'll be 200 books written about the film, and I mean, not theological, not just artistic. So. Anyway, that's what we're going to do tonight. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about Act 1 at all. If you want to talk about Act 1 afterwards, feel free, or just write me checks, and that will save us all a lot of time. Basically, all we need is money. We have about $100 million in vision and about $200,000 in the bank, so we have a little problem, but we're, hey, God is addicted to Bethlehem. I don't understand it myself, but so, okay. So just a few kind of intro words about the Passion of the Christ. It has now become, in the last, how many weeks has it been out? 10, 11 weeks, something like that. It is the biggest independent movie of all time. When I say independent movie, of course, I'm talking about a movie that was made with no studio support and no studio distribution. Now, Newmarket got involved at the very end, but didn't pay for prints and advertising, and, so Newmarket was... Actually, they were profiled in the trades recently as going to go down in recent theatrical history as having made the worst business decision of all, in that they didn't put up money for prints and advertising. So they're still making more money on this movie than they have ever made on their whole slate, which is really cute movies. Whale Rider was the biggest movie they had before this. But if they had only paid for prints and advertising, they'd be making like 20 million, as opposed to like 12. But nobody thought that this was going to be the biggest independent film of all time. It is the 7th biggest domestic box office movie ever after only 10 weeks. It just passed another one 2 days ago to move into number 7 position. It is the biggest movie ever in South America and in different parts of the Third World. It's breaking records. Broke records in Poland, broke records in certain parts of Europe. In France, they almost didn't open it. What was it the Pope said when he went there? Eldest daughter of the church, what have you done with your baptism? But anyway, poor France. It is a true benchmark for Hollywood and for the church, I would say. Now, for Hollywood, and this is pretty much everybody, everywhere I go, anyone wants to ask, what is this going to mean to Hollywood? Who knows? But for Hollywood, the reason this is a benchmark movie is there's a few things that, in terms it broke what we normally think has been the Bible of what a movie has to have. One of them is television. Now, there was limited television commercials with this movie, but limited. They were not running round the clock by any means. In some markets, they had none. And most of the networks wouldn't run them. So television was almost not present at all in terms of this. They didn't do Regis and Kelly, the Today Show. They didn't do they weren't with Ellen chatting about their dogs and, whatever. The fact is they didn't do the round of circuits that would have gotten the film the normal buzz so that you all could be aware of it. It's an indie already. An indie, isn't going to be a blockbuster. The next one, it doesn't have any stars. Now, Mel is a star, but he's not in it. And so people were like, well, he's not exactly a star director. Granted, he had Braveheart, but, he's a star actor. And he can guarantee $100 million when he acts in a movie. But as a director, nobody thought, that's completely against the conventional wisdom. And Jim Caviezel, who people couldn't even spell his name. Who else? Morgan Stern and Monica Bellucci, and, but who are these people? So no stars, this isn't going to work. And then finally, the biggest controversy, I was interviewed by NPR in September, and they were having an argument about whether it's anti-Semitic or not, and I was supposed to be the person in Hollywood to comment on the controversy. And I said, actually the biggest controversy in Hollywood isn't about that. Right now, it's about how dare he make a movie and not make it be in English. American people will not watch a foreign language film. And so that just completely shatters the Hollywood mainframe. So just those four things alone have the industry really reeling, absolutely reeling. R-E-E-L-I-N-G. Okay. Now on the church side, the movie has us reeling because I've been traveling around for 8 years giving talks, and what I hear from Christians everywhere is, we want movies without sex, language, and violence. That's our mantra, isn't it? No sex, no language, and no violence. Huh? And yet, you have this little film, which is arguably, one of the most violent movies ever made. I'm not going to say it's the most violent, and I'm not going to, I'm not falling in that, but it certainly is graphic in its violence. And I would make the case to you that it's a great film through its violence and not in spite of its violence. So that's even worse, isn't it? So what are we going to do, people of God? We got to change our line. Now we only have sex and language that we don't like. But I think that this movie could be a benchmark artistically for us as, in terms of the arts, to have to rethink what the position, our line. And in fact, I wrote about this. There's a magazine, Star, here, and I wrote an article in this, and they have copies of it over in the reception area in Ivy Hall. So it's not just for me. It's actually a whole bunch of things on the Passion and on faith in film. But I'm not going to say much more about that. But you can buy that. It's a fabulous article, if I do say so myself. So humility is truth, after all. So okay. Now, the next thing in terms of the church, what I think it's going to be, that I'm hoping is going to be a benchmark, is that it's going to signal an embrace of the screen art form. An embrace of the screen art form. I went to a conference at the Fellowship of Catholic Scholars, God love them, a few years ago, and I gave a talk on the third day, which is like the resurrection day, I suppose. But anyway, on the third day, and it was on the arts, it was on the imagination, the Christian imagination. And everyone, at least 5 people said to me before I gave my talk, well, oh, you're from Hollywood. Well, when I think of art, I think of the fine arts. And in fact, I went to give a speech just in Washington not too long ago, and 2 philosophy students accosted me from Catholic U, and they said to me, I really quibble with your use of the word art describing movies. Now, this is such elitist, snotty, snobbery ridiculousness. Honestly. Movies are powerful for you. They are, in fact, addictive for you because they are a composite of the 4 classical art forms of composition, painting, of music, of the literary, and of drama. So a movie has all the power that people in former times used to associate with painting. And when they would just, when the cavemen put paintings on their wall, on their little scratching on the wall, and they would sit down and grunt, staring at them, feeling some, wow, look what we did. And then as you go through time, and painting, becomes this, reaches its peak as a beautiful art expression of communication and art. The power of the painting, standing in front of a really great painting, movies have that. And music, any song that you've heard that it makes you cry or brings you back or makes you pause or makes you want to be whatever, movies have that. You can go on from there. So it's just ridiculous that we're like Aesop's fox who's jumped twice at the grapes, and then the third time says, "Who likes grapes? They make me sick." And that's how I feel when we sit there dissing cinema. We just sound absolutely ridiculous. So, and I hope that the passion now will settle that issue. Yes, this is an art form. Just because people make movies like American Pie and Beavis and Butthead Do America doesn't say anything about the art form, except that some people can use it for bad, and some people can be lazy when they use it. But you wouldn't burn every painting because somebody painted, whatever. Anyway, but you got to say it. Anyway, I'm really hoping that it's going to mean an embrace of the art form for the church. Okay. Now, I need to do a little quick course for you in, we started late, so good. Okay, great. I was just like, wow, that was long. All right. I'm Sicilian, but that was ridiculous. Okay. I need to do a quick course for you in what we mean when we say cinema is a visual medium, because you're not going to appreciate how stunning a film is until you understand what Hollywood sees when it looks at this movie. When I say what does it mean that a movie is a visual medium, what does that say to you? Somebody, take a chance. Come on, pretend you're Protestant, speak out loud. Come on.
It reaches the people.
You can see something. Okay, so minimally, it's something there to see. Can we do any better than that? All right, we'll work with that. Okay. Okay, when Hollywood speaks of movies as a visual medium, they mean three things. Okay? And the first thing is imagery. So I'm going to say visual medium here. Okay. And I'm doing this because I'm using a visual medium right now because I understand that you will stray from my voice every 10 minutes or so for a minute lapse. And so if you have something to look at, you might walk out of here with a little more. So anyway, the first thing we mean is imagery. Now, there's one level in which movies are simply just something to be seen, but that's not what we're talking about when we talk about the power of cinema. We're talking about lyrical imagery, poetic imagery, where something means one thing, but it also means a whole other thing. So you have Emily Dickinson has a poem about the sunset, and she talks about the colors, the gray and the blue, and then there's reds, and then there's gold and a flash of day. And you know what? It's a beautiful poem about a sunset, but it's actually about a battle charge in the Civil War. And great poetry is like that. So in a movie, an image, when they talk about there's a fabulous image in that movie, what they're saying is they have stuff in the movie that means itself, but also is like a bridge into a whole, 10 other movies of meaning. Lots and lots of meaning. And a great movie is one, a quick example is if I had a frog sitting up here, and then, when none of you were looking, I went over and kissed that frog. See, that's an image. What am I telling you? I'm looking for my prince. Thank you for the females out there who understand that image. Okay. So, that's an example of where it literally is a woman kissing an amphibian. But on another level, it's speaking to you, it's revealing to you my inner life and my backstory and all of this stuff. So that's what we're talking about, imagery. Number two, Hollywood talks about composition. And this is the way I choose to reveal the image. So, for example, a pretty standard image is if I show you a candle. A candle is an image, huh? What is it? Give me a quick, what's a candle stand for? Light. It's better to light a single candle than to curse the darkness. Thank you, Christophers, for that, okay? Now we're going to play with the image a little bit, and supposing I now add some wind. This is a moving image, and now it's a flickering candle. Now what am I telling you? It's vulnerable. It's vulnerable. Okay, so you've got a candle that's flickering. It could go out at any second, and you sense that that would be a tragedy. Why? Because you sense that this means light. Okay, so now, that's image level. Composition comes in, and I say, okay, well, I'm going to shoot this candle. We're going to use a candle, but what we're going to do is we're going to put it way down here and shoot it from, like way up over here in a football stadium at night. We're going to find this one little flickering candle. Now what am I saying? It's on the 50-yard line. Now what am I saying? What kind of a movie is this? Okay, there's going to be somebody in the sports world, in football in particular, who's going to be a flickering light. It's going to be a movie about change and hope in a dark place. See how smart you are about movies? We just gave you the whole kind of backstory and theme. But see, that's a compositional choice, where the director says, I can show them this quick for 3 seconds, and then I cut to this. And when I do that, you've just followed my story. That is called composition. Okay, now number 3. Okay. See, I'm really technically challenged here. Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, so 3 is what we call juxtaposition. And juxtaposition is when I take 2 pictures and I put them next to each other, and when I do that, they have a new meaning. There's a third meaning that results. This was pioneered by the Soviets, who didn't have enough money to buy film in the early 20s, because Marxism is such a success commercially. So what they would do is cut up old movies and then make new meaning by pasting together footage from old movies. And but there were the famous experiments. I think were done some French students, but they had a picture of the most famous French actor. This is all leading to the Passion, but you have to understand this, okay? The picture of the famous French actor, there he is, and he was staring out, and he had a little kind of smirk on his face. You're laughing because he doesn't have a nose. Okay, there. All right. So they took this image of this famous guy. This is Tom Cruise. Okay, well, no, let's make it Anthony Hopkins. It needs to be a little older, okay? And what they done was they cut next to it a little baby googling on the floor, all right? And you know what audiences said when they saw the footage? Oh, cute, what a nice man, looking at the baby like a grandfather. Isn't he sweet? So then they took the baby away, and they put a bag of money, right? And they ran it, same image. And you know what audiences said? Look at that greedy capitalist pig, lusting after the money. And then they took the money away and they put a buxom blonde, who I will not attempt to draw. And you know what audiences said? What a perverted swine! What a creep! What do we learn from this? We learn that the human mind is distinct in that it has the ability to bridge 2 unrelated images, and when you put them together, to create a third image in between. Monkeys don't do this. And movies that, in their greatness, use this called the juxtaposition of imagery. The Passion is a great film from an art standpoint because it uses all 3 of these. And here's a great quote from another director. Just came out last week. Someone just sent it to me. I loved it. Someone said, so you saw The Passion of the Christ. It's another famous Hollywood director. He said, I loved it. I'll tell you why. I think it is actually one of the most brilliant visual storytelling movies I've seen since The Talkies. These are particular techniques, especially juxtaposition, that was like at the summit during the silent film era, and then kind of has dropped out of favor. But, great directors will bring it back. He said, so much so, he said, as far as selling a story via pictures, so much so that when I was watching this movie, I turned to a friend and said, this is such a Herculean leap of Mel Gibson's talent, I think divine intervention must be a part of it. I cannot believe that Mel Gibson directed it. Not personally Mel Gibson, I mean. Braveheart was great. I mean, I can't believe any actor made that movie. This is like the most visual movie by any actor since Charles Laughton made The Night of the Hunter. No, this is 15 times more visual than that. It has the power of a silent movie, and I was amazed by the fact that it was able to mix all these different tones, etc. And he, let's see, but you have to decipher the Latin and Aramaic. Let's see, at first it was going to be a most realistic version of Jesus' story. You have to decipher the Latin and Aramaic, but then it throws that away at a certain point, and it gives you this grandiose religious image, number one. And then, he uses a curse. That's good directing. And this was by, ardent, devout, conservative Catholic Quentin Tarantino. Now, the reason I read that to you is to say that people who are honest enough to get past the charges of anti-Semitism blah, 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 and courageous enough, and Quentin Tarantino is bold man, has the thing to name this movie correctly. From a cinematic standpoint, it's stunning. So, okay, let's talk about it. Well, we talk about what the Passion is. Now, you've got to keep all this in mind while I'm talking, because I'm going to go back to it. And let me give you just 3 examples from the film. An image in the film, the Lord of the Flies, Beelzebub. You have the image of the cow's head or the ass's head surrounded by the flies. First of all, how many of you have seen The Passion? Okay, great. I was going to kill myself if you hadn't seen it. But that one scene where you have the ass's head, and I've had people say to me, well, what was that? And it's like, think about it. If I gave you a poem by Dickinson, and you didn't get it the first 5 times, if you tried and tried and tried, and you got it on the 15th time, it would mean so much to you, and you would have grown through it, and it would change you. It's not me telling you the answer that makes you grow in art. It's you communing with the art and brooding over the art and ruminating the art. And that's what saves you. And then one day you're driving down and you're all mad and then you go, doing, oh. And now you are a profound person. See, if I just handed you the answer, it wouldn't do anything for you. You have to wrestle with it. So that thing in the movie, I said to people when they say, what does that mean? I'm like, think about it. It's an ass's head. But just from the standpoint of imagery, Beelzebub literally means the Lord of the Flies. The whole Judas sequence is a glimpse of hell, isn't it? Think about it. For all eternity, we got to look at what all eternity Judas Iscariot will be experiencing. You're cursed, you're cursed, you're cursed. What did you do? What did you do? What did you do? To the point of and never being able to get away from it. All eternity. That to me was actually one of the most scary moments in the film. I wanted to be good. But okay, so that's an image, the image of the ass, which is literally representative of Beelzebub. From a compositional standpoint, the drop falling out of heaven, the way that was shot, to be like the teardrop of the Father or the cosmos, whichever coming down. I've heard both, things said. Another one would be there was a scene where the scourging is going on, where he kind of rack focuses, but he foregrounds Mary in the front and the scourging over her shoulder, and it's fuzzed, it's blurred. That's a compositional choice in the way he decided to reveal what was going on by shooting it from a different perspective. And it adds a level of meaning. So, and then finally, juxtaposition, probably the most stunning juxtaposition in the movie. And from a theological perspective for us Catholics, I could not believe I would live long enough to see such a thing. But the most profoundly Eucharistic moment, where you have the stripping of the body of Christ on Calvary, and they take the clothes off, and then they cut to a basket of bread with a napkin being unwrapped and handed to Jesus at the Last Supper. That's the juxtaposition of images. Now, what is he saying? He's saying, see this? It's that. These two are related. And no one is standing there, a bad Christian movie, God knows the ones that we would have made, most of us. You have the voiceover coming in. to explain it to you because you're stupid. But how much more powerful is it when you see it and you go, what are we watching this for now? Now, for those of us who get it, we got it and we fainted, at that and you cry even more. But other people, come up to me afterwards, some of my pagan friends. What was that cut? What was that? And when people are speaking of this movie as an evangelization opportunity, and I don't tend to think it is that much. I think it's getting the church back in its, waking up the church, and then hopefully we'll all do our thing. But there are moments like that in the church where suddenly if people come up to you and ask, why did he make that cut? I mean, if you don't take that ball and run with it, you better befriend Beelzebub's Lord of the Flies, because, that's an open door. That's something that we particularly have something to say about. Okay, so good. All right, now, those are the 3 examples in the film, but there are many more coming up. The first thing we have to say when we talk about this as a work of art is what the Passion is not, and what the Passion is. The Passion is not. I'm going to start with these 3 things, and this is one of the reasons there's been a lot of confusion about the movie, even with people who didn't come expecting, with the whole anti-Semitism thing, is it or isn't it, is it or isn't it? But like other critics who just came to evaluate the thing as a movie, who panned the movie, and I was on a panel with one of them, Kenneth Turan, who writes movies for the Los Angeles Times. And he basically said, it was at USC, at the Annenberg School, he said, from the podium, there is nothing worthy or of value in this movie at all, as a movie. Now, he also had very strong feelings about the anti-Semitism in the movie, but I couldn't believe that. But then I realized, well, one of the problems is that Kenneth is looking for The Passion of the Christ to be a conventional 3-act movie. A conventional Sid Field is the storytelling guru of Hollywood who took Aristotle and made the 3-act thing gospel for the industry. But there's no story in The Passion in the normal Hollywood sense. There's no growth in the main character, because that's what a Hollywood movie is. A character moves from dark to light. And when they figure it out, when Luke figures out, Luke, you turned your computer off. No, I'm trusting the Force. Ooh, quick, the movie ends. Star Wars is over within 2 minutes from that, because it's over. He learned what he needed to learn. Press the button, shoot, Death Star, oh, party, get the beetle, oh, it's over. So the Death Star isn't what Star Wars is about. It's about Luke needs to trust the Force. When he grows, it's over. See, there's nothing like that in The Passion. Jesus doesn't learn anything. So there's no arc of the character, of the main character. So then you're like, well, whose movie is it? That's a big Hollywood question. When you read a script that's a mess, it's basically because the writer doesn't know whose movie this is. Who changes the most in the movie? So there's nothing like that. So if I went in trying to find that, where's the first act turning point here? Where's the inciting incident? You didn't develop the main character in the first 10 pages. I need the rules of the arena and I need the character to be developed. Excuse me, what's the midpoint? Second act turning point? There's none of that in The Passion. You didn't even realize all that's in a regular Hollywood movie. It's okay. It's only the art form of our time. Okay. So the point is, people were going in trying to place it next to, It's a Wonderful Life in a narrative sense. It just doesn't, it's not that. So, and then secondly, this movie is not entertainment. So going in and expecting the rush ride, emotional rush ride up and down and in and out. When I saw the movie in June, the only note I gave, and I said, I don't know what you would ask my opinion for on this thing. It's astounding. And he was asking a lot of people at that point. And we were in his offices at Icon, and I said the only thing I would say is, you should give the audience some place to breathe. Because believe me, the version I saw, there were less cutaways than there are now. It was just linear. And there was very few cutaways. So, I said, well, just from the standpoint of letting the audience exhale and then you build them up again, which is a normal horror film. Even Texas Chainsaw Massacre has, a fun scene somewhere. And that's an entertainment technique, isn't it? It's part of the rush of enjoyment. See, this movie isn't that. What I would say the movie, this also is not the beginning of any kind of franchise. And that's important. This isn't about making you fall in love with this guy, Jesus the Nazarene, so you want to come back and see him in 4 more movies. This is not about anything like that. So there's no, people in Hollywood go to a movie and kind of see, how is this going to translate into 4 more movies? Does it have legs? This movie has no legs. So I think the best way to look at the film is, I just said what it's not. What is the film? The Passion of the Christ is the Stations of the Cross told in the art form of our time. The Stations of the Cross. And so this is one of the reasons that, when I went to USC and a lot of people were saying, well, why did you do this? I didn't get that. And a good movie, there's creative control, and the audience doesn't go, what? And I said, well, the only reason you people are doing that, I'm sorry, is this really isn't for you. It's for me and a few million of my friends who really know what he was doing. It's this thing called the Stations of the Cross, and if you come to a church, you'll see them. They're on the walls, and you walk around, and sorry, you guys can't appreciate that, and I'm really sorry about that, but, it's for us. And then the question is, did he have a right to make a movie just for us and a few million of his friends? And the funny thing is, Kenneth Turan got so mad at the artistic freedom question because I brought it up a lot, and he said, no one is saying he didn't have a right to make this movie. We're just saying he shouldn't have. Yeah. The students at USC had the same reaction that you just did, and thank God. Otherwise, I probably would have been stoned. But anyway, the fact is that the Passion will work with people on 3 different levels. And one is, if you walk into a church, I was going to say these, I was hoping there were going to be really cool stations that I could use, but these are just the worst possible. They have better ones. I was going to say, see, some people could walk in knowing nothing about our stuff as Christians and see that on the wall and be intrigued. But, this is the 20th century art stuff, But anyway, okay. But anyway, the fact is that you could walk in and see the work of art of the Passion, of the Stations, and be intrigued about the technical mastery of the art form, huh? If it was painting and say, well, that's excellent technique, beautifully done, and if the more you know about art, the more you would be moved by it, on one level. And there are some people who've seen the Passion who are experiencing that kind of response. They don't get it, the story, the narrative, but they look at the cinematography and they're like, I can't, as one of my friends said, he's a pagan, and he said, I didn't get what he was doing story-wise, but how did he light the Gethsemane, the garden scene? How did he light that? And that scene, to light it, imagine. It had to be dark enough that, Mel said to us, I wanted it to be dark enough so that people would realize one of the reasons that the guards needed Judas was because it was so dark that they wouldn't have seen who was who. Otherwise, did you ever wonder about that? Why did they need him? Well, it was dark. And yet, for a movie, we couldn't be watching a screen with all dark heads. So to light that so that we got the sense of it and we could follow it and yet have still the sense of confusion and the darkness is astounding technique. Are we having an earthquake? Okay. Okay. I brought them with me. Welcome. Yeah. Okay, so where was I going with that? Oh, right. Yeah, what it is. Thank you. Okay, so it's the Stations. All right, so the second level in which people could appreciate the Stations without being, who we are, would be to just come in and say, why, looking at the pictures, why is this man being beaten? Why isn't he fighting back? This woman is obviously his mother. What's she doing there? Why do these people hate him? So there's a certain level in which the story could speak to you, and it has. In fact, the movie has worked with people on that level who don't know all the nuances of our story, but who've been touched by the idea of the perfectly submissive, meek man praying for his enemies and the people who hate him so much. And I've talked to people like that. And then the third level is us. People for whom it's our story, this is our guy, And we're the ones weeping because we've seen, the stations come alive. We've seen the rosary, the sorrowful mysteries played out in the things that you've had in your imagination suddenly played out for you in a stunning way. So that's why they don't get why we're crying. And all you have to say to them is, well, you got to be in the club. I don't know what else to say. Okay, let's look at the images in the film. And, okay, and then, so I have 15 minutes more? Okay, good. All right, so there are, the imagery in the film, again, I think the more I think about this, the more, I've seen the film 4 times now, and every time I see it, I pick up some more. There are many, many imagery devices throughout the film. The head of the ass is just one of them. But I'm going to give you what I think are the 3 primary images in the Passion of the Christ. And when you go to see it again, watch it from this standpoint and see if you think it holds out for you. But remember, art is a source of theology. Theologians can be wrong, artists probably not as much. But here we go. I think I'm actually on good standing because I've run these by Benedict Fitzgerald, who was the co-writer on the project, and he seemed pleased that, that, in fact, it was funny because he was on the panel that same day at USC, and in between, we would be talking together on the side at the end of the panel while they were raving, calling the movie pornographic and everything. We'd be like, when he's done, let us know, and we'll, but we were talking about stuff. But anyway, so Benedict Fitzgerald, here's another thing. There are moments in the film that are, like, macabre, definitely, or freaky, weird. And you have to remember that Benedict Fitzgerald is the co-writer. And you know, of course, who used to babysit Benedict Fitzgerald as a little child. Flannery O'Connor was his babysitter. He said to me when I first met him, Wise Blood was my first foray into screenwriting. I did it for John Huston. And I'm like, yeah, my first foray into screenwriting was a 10-minute video about the sorority system at Northwestern. I'm sure I'm on the same path as you. Anyway, so keep that in mind. I think the crow scene, stuff like that, the crow moment, it's so Flannery-esque that, remember, Mel is the huge, creative mind and vision here, but Benedict Fitzgerald does have the credit as the co-writer. And he's got influences that are also, not to be ignored. Okay, so here are what I think are the primary images in the film. And the first main image of the film, lyrical image, something that means itself and means something else, is the violence. Let's talk about the violence in the movie. What does the violence mean? We have to absolutely embrace the violence, in this film when we talk about it. You cannot have this film without it. It is the film. So get comfortable with the artist making this choice. I went to see the Cathedral of Orvieto. Has anybody ever been there? Cathedral of Orvieto. Did you go to the burial chapel? Okay. They have this burial chapel in this fabulous cathedral, which is at the top of this little town outside of Rome. And this is where they used to wheel people in on their way to the grave, where the family would come with them. And on the one side is the banquet in heaven of the blessed. And they're all eating grapes and dancing and having a lark. And on the other side is the rape of the damned. And they're being tortured, garroted and raped and brutally done harm to by demons. And that's on the other side. And you sit there, and I can imagine the coffin being in the middle and the families trying to inch over. We're on this side. We know he's on this side. But you would stand there saying, I want to be on this side. And I'm thinking the power of the arts and the courage of the church to let that artist do that is extremely offensive. I don't know if I'd let children in to see that because, they're so impressionable. Come on. We're so screwed up right now. We really are. Remind me to talk about that. Somebody asked me a really good question. Ask me about Prince of Egypt and being and offending children, okay? Someone, because it's a great story. Anyway, okay, so the violence is the primary image of the film. And here's what I think it means. Number one, the violence in the film means sin is very bad. So we need to get really serious here. And people hating the violence in the movie, oh, it's over the top and stuff like that. And I would say to you, okay, if you had to artistically portray how horrific to strike the incarnate Son of God, the second person of the Trinity, for one of the creatures to turn and scourge the Creator, go ahead, you do it, and tell the truth. What does it look like? How bad is sin? How bad is all the stuff that we have been just so comfortable with? But here's the thing, when I was a kid, the nuns taught us, sin is saying no to God. And I really love that definition because it implies that sin is an act of violence, doesn't it? It's a no, a lashing out at God. And we need to start sitting there and thinking of the violence in that movie as my internet porn. My private little internet porn, huh? Or my psychological war game with my husband. When I say my here, I'm meaning you, not me. Just so we're clear. All I need is for the story to come out. Barb Nicolosi admits internet porn in a church in Philadelphia. I just totally blew that moment. But, I'm honestly, I want you to really think about that. And if you really had to portray the horror of your little stuff, don't think of Saddam Hussein. Your stuff, saying no to God and how really bad it is. And here's something else. It's not only sin against the body, against Christ, or against God. Sin is not just a saying no to God. It is an act of violence on the mystical body. And I think the movie makes that point. There's a few places in the movie where Jesus says, what you're doing to me, they're going to do to you. But there's an association of the body of Christ as being the church in the movie. So here's the thing. You do your little stuff in the darkness that you think is just between you and the darkness, and you don't think it's that bad. It means you don't become the hero that I need you to be the next day out on the street, because you've sapped your energy. And you are now less of a saint for me. So your little private dark sin has done violence in the body. Never mind. We've all suffered, especially in the Catholic side, huh? With the violence in the body that we have suffered through with our sex abuse scandal in the church. The violence that is done. But that's the problem with stuff like that, is it makes us put ourselves, and I have a friend who went to AA and he is an alcoholic, but he came back and he said to me, well, there were people in that room who were drop down drunks, and I'm not that bad, so I don't need to go. I feel better about myself, actually. That's one of the problems when you see extreme examples. But I think that movie, you should sit there watching it as a meditation, and it should bring to your mind the violence that you are doing on the body of Christ. So sin is bad. And number two, and I already brought this thing, sin is not personal. It affects the body. And number three, the third thing the violence brings out, and honestly I don't know any other way they could have done it, but I'll challenge you. You bring it out. If you have to show how strong divine love is, could you do it a better way than by having the way Jesus in the movie keeps pushing himself up off the ground? Now, like the 5 falls in the movie. I don't know about you, but round about fall number 2, I would have said, I'm staying here for the end. You just cut my head off now. I'm not getting up. You know, people have said to me, well, the movie doesn't exactly show that. No person could have gone through that, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, it's art. It's trying to show a point, a meaning. It's not trying to show a photograph. So the meaning is that the only thing that gets Jesus to his feet is because he isn't just like you and me in that he has divine love powering him. And that comes out in the movie so strongly. I mean, there's times you're just like, stay on the ground. But that's not what divine love does. So that should give you courage watching that in the movie. You're dragging and trudging through your little addictions and your little miserable marriages, and you made contracts with you married the wrong person, or you whatever, and you think that's tough? You should be able to trudge through that and power yourself up leaning on the divine love of Jesus. And keep on walking. Father Benedict Rochelle used to say all the time, I used to know him in New York when I lived there, and he used to say, Jesus doesn't say you gotta pick up your pallet and run. You just gotta keep on walking. And, you know, I take a lot of courage from that. So, okay. So the primary image in the movie is its violence. And we might get back to the violence because I think we need to also have a little more to say about that insofar as artistic freedom, and does an artist have the right to put that kind of thing in a movie? If we get to that, we will, but I want to talk about the other two images. So the next two images in the movie go together, and this is Mary and Satan. Okay, now, remember, they stand for something real. Mary and Satan, two beings who are both present at the climactic moment in human history, but they also stand for something else. And if you look at the way the film is done, it's very clear that there are two primary people who are in this character, the character of Jesus in the movie, frontal lobe. Hollywood, one of the conventions of cinema is if you want the audience to know what a character's thinking, you show us what they're seeing, what they notice, huh? And that tells us what they're thinking. Well, what does Jesus notice? And remember, the movie is told from Jesus' point of view. It's his POV, as we say in Hollywood. How do we know that? Because there's literal scenes where Mel takes the camera when he falls and goes, whoop, and the picture goes, you know, shooting off. Because it's his vision we're looking through. How about that fabulous juxtaposition of the beginning, or one of the beginnings of the Via Crucis cut to Palm Sunday? Total POV of Jesus. So it's his vision that we're getting. So whose faces in the crowd does he find over and over and over again? It's Satan and Mary. Satan and Mary. Satan and Mary. So, well, what do they stand for? Well, I think on one level, the Mary character stands for, well, let me start with the Satan. I think the Satan character stands for all of the people, and he was in, so it's in the Savior's frontal lobe adding to his suffering. All of the people for whom this sacrifice will be void. They're going to walk on by. They don't need that. They don't want that. They will have no part of it. They won't listen. They won't stop. It's not going to count for them in that sense because they will not choose to have any part of it. And that reality, that the Satan character saying, standing there in his consciousness, that Jesus suffering, knowing so many people, this will be of no account. On the other side is the Mary character. And it's a consoling presence over and over in the film for Jesus. And for us. But it's only for us because it's through his point of view, huh? The audience is seeing his point of view. And when we can fall on Mary and go, something different to look at, something better to look at, like that's Jesus' POV. Mary stands for all of the people for whom this sacrifice will make holiness possible. The people who it's gonna really, really work for. How beautiful is that? Go back and watch the film and think about that. And watch the interplay of those two figures. It's more than just about the two literal beings. It's who they stand for in the mind of the Savior. It's brilliant stuff. Okay, and the third primary image in the movie is the body of Christ. I mentioned this before. The actual body of Christ is associated with the Eucharist in two places. The first being Mary with the blood, the precious blood of Christ. I mean, oh, what a scene. It totally reminded me of one time when I was, years ago, I was at a Mass in New York, and they had Eucharistic ministers, and one of them apparently hadn't been trained very well, and somebody had, and for those of you who get this, this is a horrible story, but I'm going to tell it. And I'm sitting about 5 pews back, and the person tipped the chalice, one of the people, and, you know, a whole big little puddle splashed out on the floor, and then the Eucharistic minister didn't do anything, and somebody came in and walked through it, and then people, and I lunged out of my pew and went up onto the altar and got a purificator and then pushed the Eucharistic minister away and put it on the thing and said, you know, you don't walk through this. Honestly, when I saw that scene in the movie, I was right back at that moment, and it was like 12 years ago. But there was a sense of, this is not, we're not going to have the Roman soldier cohort marching through this stuff in that scene. Very Eucharistic association. A lot of my evangelical friends are like, what was that? What was she doing? And I was like, well, she knew it was, you know, God's blood. And so there's such an open doorway to talk there. And then, of course, the second one is on Calvary. But then there's a direct association of, you know, if they're doing this to me, they're going to do it to you. So the body of the church, the body of Christ, and the wounds of the body made by sin. So those are the three primary images of this movie. And when you look at it from that standpoint, you start to begin to get a sense of the power of it. Now, here's what you're all thinking. Well, I didn't really think of that, and it still worked on me. See, that's because it's great art, and it's seamless, but it's working on you. I'm telling you how it's working on you. You don't need to understand Novocaine for it to make you numb. And from a technical standpoint, that's what Hollywood does so well. We know how to take you on a journey, and you don't have to understand how. But this is a huge part of the underpinnings of this movie that make it work, and it's the artistic imagery of the film. So, okay, I'm going to stop there because we're now I am.